Judge Edward Chen's laughter echoes through the courtroom, mocking Jasmine Crockett's plea. Her fiery response ignites a legal firestorm, exposing corruption and shaking the system. What she does next will shock everyone. The courtroom in San Francisco's Federal District was a pressure cooker, its polished wood and high ceilings amplifying every whisper and gesture. On April 15, 2025, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, a rising star from Texas with a reputation as a fierce advocate for justice, stood at the defendant's table, her jaw tight. She wasn't here as a politician but as a lawyer, defending a group of activists accused of disrupting a corporate lobbying event. The case had drawn national attention, not just because of Crockett's involvement, but because the activists claimed they were exposing illegal dealings between a tech giant and government officials. Crockett, known for her work on criminal justice reform and her vocal criticism of systemic corruption, had taken the case pro bono, believing it struck at the heart of power abuses she'd long fought against. The plaintiffs, a coalition of corporate interests, argued the activists had caused financial harm and endangered public safety. But Crockett saw something deeper, a pattern of influence peddling that implicated high-ranking officials, including those tied to the court itself. Her decision to represent the activists stemmed from her real-world advocacy, where she'd repeatedly called out cozy relationships between corporations and government, as seen in her 2023 push for fentanyl testing legislation and her 2024 letter demanding Supreme Court recusal in cases involving political bias. This case was personal. She'd grown up watching the powerless get crushed by systems rigged against them, and now, with her legal expertise and congressional platform, she was determined to fight back. Judge Edward Chen presided, his reputation as a no-nonsense jurist preceding him. Appointed in 2011, Chen had a history of rulings that balanced progressive ideals with strict legalism, often clashing with those who challenged his authority. Today, his eyes glinted with something sharper than usual. Chen had reason to challenge Crockett. Her public statements, including a recent speech at a human rights campaign dinner where she'd criticized judicial overreach, had indirectly jabbed at judges like him, who she implied were too entrenched in elite circles. Chen, who'd overseen cases involving tech giants and political figures, took her comments as a personal affront, especially since this case touched on his own past rulings favoring corporate interests. The tension was palpable as he leaned forward, his voice cutting through the room. "Ms. Crockett," Chen began, his tone laced with condescension, "your client's actions suggest anarchy, not activism. Do you expect this court to entertain their conspiracy theories about corporate malfeasance?" the gallery murmured, sensing the jab. Crockett's eyes narrowed, but she kept her composure, her years as a public defender steeling her against courtroom intimidation. She adjusted her stance, her voice steady but forceful. "Your Honor, my clients acted to expose corruption that this court seems reluctant to acknowledge. We have evidence, financial records, communications, that points to illegal lobbying, influencing policy at the highest levels." Her words were a gauntlet, thrown not just at the plaintiffs but at Chen himself, whose past rulings had shielded similar corporate players. The activists, a diverse group of young whistleblowers, sat behind her, their faces a mix of hope and fear. They'd trusted Crockett to amplify their cause, but the stakes were rising fast. Chen's lips curled into a smirk. Then a low chuckle escaped, reverberating through the silent courtroom. The sound was deliberate, a power play meant to diminish her. "Evidence, Ms. Crockett? You bring rumors and expect to upend the law?" His laughter stung, a public dismissal that made the gallery gasp. Reporters scribbled furiously, sensing a story that would dominate headlines. Crockett's face burned, but not with embarrassment, with resolve. She knew Chen's mockery wasn't just about her. It was about silencing anyone who dared challenge the system's untouchables. She stepped closer to the podium, her voice dropping to a controlled, piercing cadence. Laugh all you want, Your Honor, but the truth doesn't bend to your amusement. We'll show this court exactly how deep this corruption runs." The room froze. Chen's smirk faded, replaced by a flicker of unease. Crockett wasn't backing down, and her next move, a bold request for discovery into the court's own financial ties, would send shockwaves through the legal world. But as she prepared to file the motion, a clerk slipped Chen a note, and his expression darkened. Something bigger was at play, and Crockett was about to walk into a trap. The air in the courtroom crackled as Jasmine Crockett's words hung like a blade, her challenge to Judge Edward Chen slicing through the silence. She gripped the podium, her knuckles pale, ready to file a motion that would demand transparency into the court's financial ties, a move that could expose conflicts of interest linked to Chen himself. But the clerk's note, now clutched in Chen's hand, shifted the dynamic. His eyes, once sharp with mockery, now burned with something colder, more calculated. The gallery sensed it too, their whispers rising as Chen cleared his throat, his voice now stripped of its earlier levity. "Ms. Crockett," he said, his tone deliberate, "you speak of truth, yet you stand here with no standing. This court has just been informed that your client's so-called evidence, your financial records, were obtained through unauthorized means, hacking, to be precise." The accusation landed like a grenade. Gasps rippled through the room and Crockett's heart sank, though her face betrayed nothing. The activists behind her shifted, their eyes darting to her for reassurance. She hadn't seen this coming, but she knew the game. Chen was trying to discredit her case before it could gain traction. "Your Honor," Crockett countered, her voice steady despite the rising panic. "That's a serious allegation, and I'll need to see this supposed proof of misconduct." She was stalling, buying time to think. The evidence in question, bank transfers and emails implicating the tech giant in bribing officials, had been meticulously vetted by her team. She'd ensured it was legally obtained through whistleblower protections, but Chen's claim suggested someone had tipped the court off, framing her clients as criminals. The note in his hand was the key, and she needed to know who sent it. Chen leaned back, his gaze locked on her. "You'll have your chance to review, Ms. Crockett, but I warn you, pushing this motion for discovery into the court's affairs will only bury you deeper." The threat was clear, and the gallery buzzed with speculation. Reporters typed furiously, their headlines already forming. "Congresswoman's case implodes. Under hacking scandal." Crockett's mind raced. Chen's confidence suggested he had an ace up his sleeve, possibly tied to his own network of influence. His past rulings, including a 2022 case shielding a tech firm from liability, hinted at cozy ties to the same corporate players her clients were targeting. This wasn't just a legal battle. It was personal. She took a breath, her years as a public defender kicking in. "If the court is so certain of its integrity," she said, her voice rising, "then it should welcome my motion. Transparency isn't a threat to justice. It's the foundation of it." The room erupted in murmurs, some in awe of her audacity, others skeptical of her chances. Chen's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, the plaintiff's attorney, a slick, corporate lawyer named Victor Hayes, stood. Known for defending tech moguls, Hayes had a reputation for dismantling opponents with surgical precision. "Your Honor," Hayes interjected, his voice smooth but venomous, "Ms. Crockett's motion is a distraction from her client's crimes. We have new evidence, witness testimony, that ties her activists to a coordinated cyber attack on our client's servers." He slid a folder across the table, its contents a mystery but its timing too perfect. Crockett's stomach churned. This was the trap, orchestrated to discredit her and bury the case. She glanced at her clients, their faces pale. They were young, idealistic, but not hackers. Someone was framing them, and Hayes's smug grin suggested he knew exactly who. Crockett's mind flashed to her real-world fight against systemic corruption. her 2024 congressional push to expose dark money in politics. This case was an extension of that battle, and she couldn't let it collapse. "Your Honor," she said, stepping forward, "I request an immediate recess to review this so-called evidence. If Mr. Hayes is so confident, he won't object to scrutiny." Hayes's smile faltered and Chen's eyes narrowed. The judge hesitated, then nodded. Recess granted. 2 hours. As the gavel struck, Crockett gathered her team, her voice low. "We're being set up, but we're not out. Find out who's behind that witness." Her lead investigator, a sharp former journalist, named Lena, nodded, already dialing contacts. The activists huddled close, one whispering, "They're scared of what we know." Crockett met their eyes, her resolve hardening. She was about to uncover a conspiracy that reached beyond the courtroom, but the next piece of evidence, a leaked email implicating Chen himself, would put her in the crosshairs of a dangerous power. The courtroom doors swung shut, sealing Jasmine Crockett and her team in a small windowless conference room during the recess. The weight of the moment pressed against her chest as she leaned over a table strewn with legal pads and laptops. Lena, her investigator, was already on the phone, her voice a low murmur as she chased leads on the mysterious witness Victor Hayes had introduced. The activists, still shaken, sat close, their whispers about fear and truth fueling Crockett's fire. She knew they were right. Someone was desperate to bury what they'd uncovered. The leaked email, now burning a hole in her briefcase, was her ace, but using it could destroy her. It allegedly showed Judge Edward Chen receiving undisclosed payments from a tech giant's lobbying arm tied to a case he'd ruled on in 2023. If authentic, it could expose Chen's bias and blow the case wide open. But if she played it wrong, it could end her career. Crockett's phone buzzed, a text from Lena. "Witness is a former employee of the tech firm. Fired for whistleblowing, now flipped. Paid off?" Crockett's pulse quickened. This was no coincidence. Hayes and Chen were moving chess pieces, and she was running out of time to counter. She turned to her team, her voice sharp. "We need to verify that email's authenticity before we go back in there. If it's real, we've got Chen. If it's a plant, we're done." Lena nodded, already pulling up encrypted files from a source deep in the tech world. The activists, led by a wiry coder named Marcus, offered to cross-check metadata. Crockett gave them a tight nod, her mind racing. Her real-world fight for transparency, like her 2024 push against dark money in a Congress had prepared her for this, but the stakes here were visceral. The clock ticked down. Outside, reporters swarmed, their cameras flashing as they speculated on Crockett's next move. Social media was ablaze, with Crockett vs. Chen trending, some praising her courage, others calling her reckless. She ignored it, focusing on the email. Lena's source confirmed it was sent from a server tied to the tech giant, but the chain of custody was murky. Crockett's gut screamed caution, but her heart demanded action. She'd built her career on calling out corruption, from her 2023 fentanyl reform advocacy to her public clashes with judicial overreach. This was her moment to strike. The recess ended, and the courtroom buzzed as Crockett strode back to the podium, her face a mask of defiance. Chen's eyes locked onto her, his earlier unease replaced by a steely calm that unnerved her. Hayes stood, his smirk intact, ready to unveil his witness. But Crockett moved first, her voice cutting through the tension. "Your Honor, before we proceed with Mr. Hayes's witness, I move to introduce new evidence, a communication that raises serious questions about this court's impartiality." The gallery erupted, and Chen's gavel slammed, demanding order. His voice was ice. "You tread on dangerous ground, Ms. Crockett. Specify this evidence, or I'll hold you in contempt." She held his gaze, her heart pounding. "An email, Your Honor, suggesting financial ties between this court and the plaintiff's parent company." The room exploded in gasps and shouts. Chen's face paled, but only for a moment before his eyes narrowed. "You dare accuse this court?" he roared, his voice shaking the room. "Submit this so-called evidence immediately, or face consequences." Crockett handed the document to the clerk, her hands steady despite the storm in her chest. She knew the risk. Chen could dismiss it as fabricated, or worse, use it to paint her as a conspiracist. But she'd seen the fear in his eyes, however fleeting. Hayes leapt to his feet, his voice dripping with scorn. "This is a desperate stunt, Your Honor. Ms. Crockett's evidence is likely as fraudulent as her client's hacking." He turned to the gallery, playing to the cameras. "She's grasping at straws to save a sinking case." Crockett's blood boiled, but she kept her focus on Chen, whose silence was deafening. He skimmed the email, his expression unreadable, then set it down. "This will be reviewed," he said, his voice tight. "But I warn you, Ms. Crockett, false accusations have costs." The threat hung heavy, and she felt the trap tightening. Lena slipped her a note. "Witness is in the hall. He's nervous. We can break him." Crockett's eyes flickered with hope, but as Chen called the witness, a gaunt man with shifty eyes, she sensed a new danger. This man's testimony could bury her case, and someone in the shadows was pulling his strings. The courtroom's tension was a living thing, coiling tighter, as the gaunt witness, introduced as Daniel Kessler, took the stand. His eyes darted between Judge Edward Chen and Victor Hayes, avoiding Jasmine Crockett's piercing gaze. She clutched Lena's note. Its words, "He's nervous. We can break him," fueling her resolve. Kessler's testimony could dismantle her case, painting her activist clients as cybercriminals. But Crockett sensed his unease, a crack in the armor of the conspiracy she was unraveling. Chen's warning about false accusations echoed in her mind, but she pushed it aside. She'd submitted the leaked email implicating Chen's financial ties, and though he'd promised to review it, his cold demeanor suggested he was circling, ready to strike. Hayes' smug accusation of fraud still stung, but Crockett's focus was razor-sharp as Kessler was sworn in. Hayes approached the witness, his voice smooth and predatory. "Mr. Kessler, you worked for our client, TechCore, until last year, correct?" Kessler nodded, his Adam's apple bobbing. "And you witnessed the defendants' group orchestrating a cyber attack on TechCore's servers, did you not?" The question was a loaded gun, and Kessler's hesitation was palpable. Crockett leaned forward, her instincts screaming. Lena's intel was right. This man was a weak link. She scribbled a note to her second chair. "Cross-examine hard. He's hiding something." Kessler mumbled, "Yes, I saw their plans. Emails, chats, all of it." The gallery murmured, and Hayes flashed a triumphant grin. But Crockett caught Kessler's glance toward Chen, a fleeting look of fear. She stood, her voice cutting through the room. "Objection, Your Honor. The witness's testimony lacks specificity. We demand access to these alleged communications." Chen's eyes narrowed, his patience visibly thinning. "Overruled, Ms. Crockett. You'll have your chance to cross-examine." His tone was a warning, but she didn't flinch. She'd faced down hostile judges before, her real-world battles against judicial bias, seen in her 2024 call for Supreme Court recusal, steeling her for this moment. Hayes continued, coaxing Kessler into detailing a supposed plot by the activists to steal proprietary data. But Kessler's answers grew shaky, his hands fidgeting. Crockett's mind raced, piecing together Lena's earlier text. Kessler had been a whistleblower, fired by TechCore, then mysteriously rehired. Someone had bought his silence, and she needed to expose it now. When Hayes finished, Crockett rose, her presence commanding the room. "Mr. Kessler," she began, her voice calm but laced with steel. "You claim you saw my client's plans. Yet you were terminated from TechCore for leaking internal documents, weren't you?" The gallery buzzed, and Kessler's face drained of color. Hayes shot to his feet. Objection! Irrelevant! Chen's gavel cracked, but Crockett pressed on. It's relevant, Your Honor, if the witness was coerced into testifying. Chen's expression darkened, but he allowed it. His silence, a ticking bomb. Kessler stammered, I was let go, but they brought me back. Crockett stepped closer, her voice dropping to a piercing whisper. Brought you back with a payout, didn't they? To lie about my clients and bury their evidence of TechCore's illegal lobbying? The room erupted. Reporters scribbling, cameras flashing. Kessler's eyes widened, and he glanced at Hayes, who was visibly tense. I don't know what you're talking about, Kessler muttered, but his voice cracked. Crockett pounced. Then explain the $50,000 deposit in your account 2 weeks ago, Mr. Kessler, from a shell company tied to TechCore. She was bluffing, banking on Lena's hunch, but the gamble paid off. Kessler froze, his mouth opening and closing like a trapped fish. The gallery was chaos, and Chen's gavel slammed repeatedly, demanding order. Enough, Chen roared, his face flushed. Ms. Crockett, you are out of line. This court will not tolerate baseless accusations. But his voice betrayed a tremor, and Crockett saw it. The fear she'd sparked with the email, now amplified by Kessler's unraveling. She turned to the judge, her voice steady. Your Honor, I request a sidebar to discuss this witness's credibility, given his financial ties. Chen's eyes burned, but he nodded, gesturing her and Hayes to approach. At the bench, Hayes hissed, You're digging your own grave, Crockett. She ignored him, addressing Chen. This witness is compromised, and I believe this court knows why. Chen's jaw clenched, and for a moment she thought he'd explode. Instead, he dismissed the sidebar, his voice tight. We'll reconvene tomorrow. Court adjourned. As the gavel fell, Crockett's team swarmed her, Lena whispering, We've got a lead on the shell company. But as she gathered her files, a court officer slipped her a cryptic note. Drop the email, or you'll lose more than this case. Her blood ran cold, but her resolve hardened. Someone was watching, and they were desperate to stop her. Jasmine Crockett's fingers tightened around the cryptic note. Its words, drop the email, or you'll lose more than this case, searing into her mind as she left the courtroom. The threat was real, but so was her determination. Lena's whispered update about the shell company tied to TechCore's payout gave her a lifeline, and she wasn't about to let fear derail her. The San Francisco night buzzed with reporters outside, their cameras flashing as she pushed through, her face a mask of resolve. Inside, her team huddled in a cramped hotel room. Lena's laptop opened to a chain of financial records linking the shell company to a network of lobbying firms, and, crucially, to an account tied to Judge Edward Chen's former law partner. The leaked email implicating Chen was authentic, and now they had corroboration. But using it meant risking everything. Crockett's mind flashed to her real-world battles, her 2024 push against dark money, her 2023 advocacy for justice reform. This case was the culmination of those fights, a chance to expose a system rigged to protect the powerful. She turned to Lena, her voice low. We go all in tomorrow. File a motion to recuse Chen and subpoena the shell company's records. Marcus, the activist coder, nodded, his fingers flying over a keyboard to secure their evidence digitally. The activists, though exhausted, radiated hope. We're with you, one said, her voice firm. Crockett met their eyes, feeling the weight of their trust. Sleep eluded her that night, the note's threat looping in her mind. By morning, the courtroom was a powder keg, packed with spectators and media. Chen took the bench, his face an unreadable mask, but Crockett saw the strain in his eyes. Victor Hayes, TechCore's lawyer, sat smugly, unaware of the storm coming. Crockett rose, her voice steady. Your Honor, we move for your recusal based on evidence of financial ties to the plaintiff's parent company, as detailed in the email submitted yesterday, and new records we're prepared to enter. The gallery gasped, and Chen's gavel froze mid-air. His voice was a low growl. "You realize the gravity of this, Ms. Crockett?" "I do," she replied, unflinching. "And I realize the public deserves a court free of bias." She handed the clerk a folder, bank records, emails, and a sworn affidavit from a TechCore whistleblower confirming the shell company's role. Hayes leapt up, his composure cracking. "This is outrageous! These documents are fabricated!" But Crockett was ready. "Then let's subpoena the shell company's executives, Mr. Hayes, unless you're afraid of what they'll say." The room erupted, and Chen's face reddened, his control slipping. He slammed his gavel, demanding order, but the chaos was unstoppable. Crockett turned to the gallery, her voice rising. "This case isn't just about my clients. It's about a system that shields corruption while silencing the truth." Her words electrified the room, and even Chen seemed momentarily stunned. He adjourned the court, ordering a review of the recusal motion, but Crockett knew the tide was turning. Lena's team had leaked the financial records to trusted journalists, and by noon, headlines screamed, "Judge Chen faces recusal over TechCore ties." Social media exploded, with "Justice for Crockett" trending globally. The next day, Chen recused, himself citing public confidence in the judiciary. A new judge was assigned, and Crockett's team presented their full case, exposing TechCore's lobbying scheme. The activists were cleared of hacking charges, their evidence validated. Kessler, the shaky witness, confessed to being coerced, implicating Hayes in the payoff. TechCore settled, agreeing to a federal audit, and the case sparked investigations into judicial ethics nationwide. Crockett stood outside the courthouse, cameras flashing, her clients beside her. "This isn't my victory," she said, her voice steady. "It's ours. When we fight for truth, the system has to listen." The crowd cheered, and Lena squeezed her arm, whispering, "You did it." Crockett smiled, but her eyes scanned the horizon. The note's author was still out there, a reminder that power never yields quietly. Yet she felt triumphant, her faith in justice renewed. The legal system faced fierce debate, with reforms proposed to curb judicial conflicts. Crockett returned to Congress, her resolve stronger, ready for the next battle, knowing she'd shown the world what courage could do.